Rock on.
Hello, everybody. So thanks for joining in. We're going finally live with a fantastic edition of where myself and Jeremy from two awesome companies in the world of cold email will dive in and plunge essentially, and you may have seen the title, into the world of cold email deliverability. We're going to look at some cool data. We're going to look at some recommendations and ultimately to up your game. Whether you are an agency or you are a SaaS company, growth marketer, GTM engineer, whatever you name it, it's all the same. We're all looking here to build pipeline across cold email, right, LinkedIn, and cold calling. But specifically, this session will be just purely on the world of all things cold email. We're going to dive specifically deep and into the world of sending and stats and looking things by ESP. But then additionally, I'm going to dive a bit into the world of infrastructure and what sort of insights we see in there. So I'm going to take the infrastructure part while Jeremy will do a fantastic job definitely on the sending part. Along the way, feel free to ask any questions. One thing I would love to see, guys, from you is just to jot down where you are from tuning in the world. It's always fantastic to see customers all around the world. Whether Jeremy's right now in Japan, so maybe you are in Japan, say hi, or all the way down to the West Coast, Bay Area, whatever. Wherever you are in the world, will be really cool to see where you're from. This session is going live across all the channels that we have access to. Jeremy did get banned on Facebook though, so maybe not all channels, but essentially a lot of channels. This session will be recorded, so it will be also accessible. We don't share the slides, but the session will be definitely there. And yes, you can definitely find us on LinkedIn. So without further ado, let's do a quick intro. But maybe before that, Jeremy, I'll start it off with you because I already talked a lot. Right, so
That's fine. This is not a competition, Frank. You're
no,
good.
So while we're doing this, if you could just introduce yourself, because the software is asking me to upload the presentation into a drive and then share a drive link. 1 second.
Well, that sounds easy.
Yeah, Google Drive, yes. Add Google Slides. Sorry, we should have done that, but we've been discussing with Jeremy. We're already on this call for like half an hour, chatting about stuff and what happens in the world of email. And then one thing we didn't, remember to do is making sure the presentation actually is running seamlessly. But here we go, just setting it all up.
Well, I did spend the whole of today and some time also yesterday to grab some stats. So I'm pretty excited about what we're gonna show. There's a few stats that actually surprised me, and yeah, I'm very, very eager to share that with everyone here today.
Yeah, so let's bring up these slides and what we have got for you guys. We literally worked on this for days and days, pulling data from the back end, and bringing it onto the stage. So I think, Jeremy, you have the control, so over to you.
Do I? That's awesome. All right. Yeah, I can click on the next one. So this is a very old presentation that I started. I basically took one from 2014, and it was titled "How to Get 98% of Your Emails Delivered." I thought it's still a great title today, to this day, and I would probably title it exactly the same way because there's like so many good things, and this is possible. Quick self-promotion. So I'm the founder of QuickMail, and I basically do, if you like what you're seeing today in terms of the stats that I'm giving or the information that I'm giving, I highly encourage you to sign up to my newsletter. I try to do it once a week, and basically what you find on it is things you won't find anywhere else on the internet. So I think it's worth a shout. All right, so 3 points for me on the agenda. I want to give you as much value as I can. 3 main points for me is how to avoid the spam filters in 2025, how to reduce the spam complaint, although I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, and how to scale the easy way, which I think Frank has his idea on how to do, but I chime in and give my opinion too. So who am I? Like, who the hell, am I? So I've been building QuickMail since 2014. I was one of the 3 first cold outreach software, together with Outreach.io and I think Reply.io as well. We opened up this this new blue ocean in a sense. Next year, I created like a book on how to grow your business with cold email. I created like just a couple of Udemy course. Useless, by the way. Don't do Udemy course. It's a waste of time. And I spent like 400 podcast episodes with my friend Jack. We still publish like one episode every week. So if you're interested, then go for it. I'm not a fraud. This is my latest campaign. It's a very quick one. I run for like a few weeks already. You can see I had a nice little 100% open rate. I got a disappointing 8% reply rate, but it's only the first email. I'm hoping that with a follow-up is going to bump a bit this number, and I'm very disappointed by the 7% bounce rate. That's definitely shouldn't happen in 2025. I didn't clear my list. I thought I had a good list. I've been fooled because of where I scraped it. So no excuse, guys. Always verify your list. Anyway, moving on. So what's QuickMail? Very briefly, QuickMail is a tool to help you automate your cold email and LinkedIn automation outreach automatically. Basically, our mission is the first point. We help small and medium businesses sell more. Right now, we're doing it with outreach, but if tomorrow we need to introduce cold callings, then we'll introduce cold calling. So basically, this is our mission, and the way we're doing it is with email and LinkedIn at the moment. I think it's over to you, Frank. Who are you?
Yes. So while Jeremy has been busy building really cool software, which is the reason actually why I invited him actually for this, I've been busy spending my life, selling software for other companies and using similar software to Jeremy's back in the days to ultimately scale outreach, right? So I've been sending gazillions of emails, had a sales team. Then by the end of it, with about 50 salespeople, where we had to send a lot of these emails. But back in the days, actually, emails for us was more of a necessity to do the cold call, right? So back in the days, it was all about multi-channel. It still is about multi-channel. But definitely things have gone a lot worse since I've been the VP sales of a company. And deliverability is definitely top of mind for any company that that you are and that we're looking at in the world. And I think there's a lot of essentially also legacy companies that are in the space. They're very, very big, and they believe that deliverability is really the accountability of a customer, meaning the customer has to resolve that problem. Whereas I believe, the accountability that lies with the software vendor. So let's say with Jeremy, he's been building the software, and we've been building the software to help users to solve deliverability. Because in a typical company, you can't solve the deliverability with your existing sales team. The sales team typically does not have the expertise. Neither you have an email deliverability expert in-house. You will never get a headcount for deliverability expert, in-house. And the engineering team also does not typically know what to do with email deliverability. So yeah, less than 1% of companies in the world know how to solve deliverability. And this is why, we decided to go on this journey with this kind of solving the first pain, but really we're in the business of essentially helping companies to scale their pipeline with the least headcount possible. We do a few things, but really are going to focus in this particular session that we're doing right now on the infrastructure part of things. So yeah, I spent over a decade in sales. We're working for a bunch of companies and just started Salesforce about 20 months ago. And on our end, we scaled from $0 to $3 million in about 12 months, so doing pretty well, and then looking to scale on further. And these are kind of just the 6 products that we do. I'm not going to talk too much about them, but there's an AI agent, naturally. There's a execution software. We do some warm-up. We do some infrastructure. And we're just about to roll out also LeadsForge.ai, which is actually the #1 search engine for finding leads. So that's quite exciting because nothing like that exists in the market. And I stole this idea from Google and working in Google for a few years. And I was like, damn, I wish there was a search engine for leads. And that's exactly what we built. So that's it on that front. Over to you, Jeremy.
Nice. Okay, so there's a couple of slides that are interesting. Basically, this slide, I'm not going to go over everything. This will be a very long discussion, but it's basically just showing you that there are a lot of things that impact deliverability, and most of those things are actually on the setup, on the technical side of things. So there's a lot of things that your platform will help you doing, whether it's the choice of ISP has a huge impact, what domain you're using. Obviously, there are some mandatory things like installing SPF, DKIM, and all those sort of things. Well, that's funny you're changing the layout because basically Oh, there you go. That's better. Because basically there is a link here. It's going to be hard to type, actually. I'm not even sure if I can put that into the chat or whatever. But anyway,
you have to Google.
Yeah, we'll add it into the show notes. But basically, if you're interested in all those setup for deliverability, I highly encourage you to look at this video. I started it thinking it's a 5 minute job, just to send that to a few friends who had problems with deliverability, and turns out being like a 40 minutes video. Just not because I keep on talking, it's just because there is a lot of points to actually address. So if you're interested in deliverability and knowing what it means, then I encourage you to basically look at this video. We'll put it into the show notes. Cool with you, Frank?
Yes.
All right. The only thing I will add to this is, so QuickMail, I mean, I created QuickMail like more than 10 years ago, and there's a few innovation that we pioneered. And I think this year we are pioneering like 2 innovations. One is called Deliverability AI, and the other one is Reward with AI. Basically, we came up with, a few years ago, we came up with inbox rotation, which enable you to send a huge number of emails, but from lots of different email addresses. And so you could just, add all your email addresses, and it will automatically load or automatically balance the number of emails that get sent per email address, meaning each email address will send a very low volume and fly under the radar of Google or Microsoft, whatever. That worked well, so we pioneered that. And then Deliverability AI is the next step. So imagine you still have that, but on top of it, we monitor every day the deliverability of all your inboxes. So if we find one inbox is not delivering very well, we just take the email out and then we take another email in. So now you can have like 200 email addresses, and I'm presuming like Frank is going to tell you how to buy some, but you can have like 200 email addresses working on your campaign and automatically QuickMail looking at the deliverability index for all of your inboxes and replacing them as soon as they drop. So I think that's the what's going to be a game changer for 2025. And the second thing is Reward with AI. There's a lot of talk about like, hey, you should use Spintax. And yes, we recommended using Spintax for the last 10 years. But now the game is different in a sense that it's really difficult to maintain Spintax text. Like you end up with like some spaghetti text. It's really difficult, impossible to read even. And you turn out like it's pretty much impossible to do good A/B testing. So what we have instead in QuickMail is the ability to just reword with AI. We basically take your email, we're using AI to sort of like rephrase it into a certain way so it doesn't lose the meaning, only the words are changing and the structure, and it sends it. And it's actually pretty dope. It actually works very, very well. And so that way you can do really meaningful A/B testing, like talking about like testing not the words, but actually testing different ideas. So like, different unique selling points in what order and stuff like that. So those are 2 things I wanted to highlight that are specific to QuickMail. Obviously, I'm biased because obviously I do QuickMail, but at the same time, day in, day out, I'm thinking about like what could improve QuickMail. So those are the 2 features that we came up with. All right, so enough sort of like self-promotion, whatever. I'm going to actually show some stats that I grabbed from QuickMail. And the stats that I'm interested in is really reply rates, because we could look at the open rate, but to me, the open rate number is not really interesting. What's interesting is always a trend. So if you're trending up in your reply rate, in your open rate, you may be doing something well. If you're trending down, then there may be a problem that maybe your reputation of your domain is going bad or stuff like that. So what I wanted to really look at in terms of the number was actually the reply rate. And what I did is I grabbed the entire millions and millions of emails that are sent on QuickMail and aggregated that into one, a few slides. What's important is like it's per email. So obviously, if you have a 3 email sequence, like you're sending someone 3 emails, if one email is open, it will be 100% open rate for when you actually do per lead. But this is per email. So if you send 3 email, 1 email is open, it's 33% open rate. So I think that's important because it won't show you like 10% open rate. It will show you more like 3 or 1% open rate. Anyway, moving on. So this is basically the global open rate on the platform, and you can see there are some interesting thing that we can say. So the world of cold outreach is never static. It's very dynamic because there's a lot of different actors playing, especially on the ESP side, but also on the type of outreach people are sending, on the feature they're enabling, all those sort of things. Actually, it's a lot of a cat and mouse game to some extent. So we can see like we had like a big drop around May, June last year. So we had like some big drop here in terms of the response rate. Part of it is because Google and Outlook actually implemented different spam filters during that time. And we can see that sadly, you know, people didn't quite recover from that. And a lot of agencies been shaken by this thing. But as we're going to see, it's not the biggest point. Anyway, so I went away and decided to figure out, well, how does it actually is per ESP, so email service provider. So whether it's Google, Microsoft, and so on. So I went ahead and then look at the reply rate for Gmail specifically. And as you can see, is actually Gmail is not having like a good time when you're actually sending on Gmail at the moment. And again, this is dynamic. That is not necessarily the picture of last year or like 2 years ago and stuff like that. It keeps on evolving. But right now, it seems like Google is really having like a lot of difficulties. And that's also why we're actually just rolling out on QuickMail, shameless plug again, but we're actually rolling out the ability to, within the app, to now spawn Google Workspaces. So that way we'll make sure that everything is properly set up, like the SPA, the DKIM, the avatar as well. How many emails do I receive where the avatar is not even set on Google? Or sometimes the name is not even set properly. You see the email instead of the name. You're like, what the hell, guys? Anyway, we set up everything. We add the SSL for the custom domain tracking, super important. And
but would
and
you
then we
say
add
the reply rate, so naturally it's dropping, would you say it has to do mainly with DNS or mainly with the changes, you know, by the too many ESPs?
So I wasn't able to actually figure out why this particular drop is happening. So it's a little bit puzzling because I think when you have like a trend like that,
Yep.
this is not a one-off, you know, thing that changed. It's actually a combination of a lot of things, and I wasn't able to pinpoint it. But there are a few things that are really telling that we're gonna look at, which are like, for example, the open tracking.
Yep.
We're gonna come to this one, Frank. It's interesting. But I don't have the answer to everything. Bear in mind that a lot of things are like black box, and we have to sort of reverse engineer what could happen. So we are doing tests, but sometimes, you know, you can run 100 tests and still not figure out the right thing because we haven't figured out like the right hypothesis. But this is a trend, and it's specific to the Gmail sender at the moment. That's also why we're rolling out our own stuff. So we're gonna know like they're perfectly like set up with no problem, and then we're gonna see, you know, what's going on. Anyway, for Outlook, they didn't give a shit. They're still like 1% more or less. So they had like a big bonus at the summer of 2023, but more or less it's pretty much the same. Like they don't move. You're gonna get 1% reply rate on Outlook, whatever you're doing. So pretty fun. On SMTP, and I know that's your world, and people are asking me like, hey, what do you find of, you know, what do you think of SMTP? So SMTP for me is like, it's always a hit and miss. It's very difficult to figure out like a sender that is actually really good and it's consistently good. And so yes, you're gonna have those 4% spikes sometimes, you're gonna have like those 2%, 3%, but you're also going to have like really bad number as well. So it's really, really difficult. On top of that, obviously IP plays a role. It doesn't with Gmail and Outlook. And that's also why I like their infrastructure. It's kind of like, yes, with Gmail, you may not get the best result, but it's also the devil you know what I mean? So you may get definitely better results with custom SMTPs, but you may also get way worse. So it kind of like depends a lot more about the vendor, the reputation, how they're managing their IP. Like there's so many other things.
Yeah, I always say,
Right.
you know, it depends on the ICP. You know, who is it that you're targeting? What is the email
Very
service
true.
provider that the ICP uses? I mean, and what are the, you know, the ICP also, you know, what are the email security protocols that potentially
Barracuda and stuff. Yeah, they
Yeah,
were
exactly.
playing
So
field.
I mean, it really depends, and this is why you should just ask, this is my ICP, and then you should figure out, just take maybe, I would say 10, to take like, maybe 10 customers, maybe 100 customers, and then put those into like MX Toolbox, like a free tool or third-party tool, and just check essentially what is the email sending software that they use, or whether they use Barracuda or whatever, Mimecast and all that stuff, and you can see that essentially, and based on that, you make a decision essentially on what's potentially best thing to do for you. Because
I love that.
Depending on ICP, you should, and you can kind of figure it out yourself. You don't really need a tool for that. You don't, the tool is free. You just need to go and just do that research for you. And then based on that, you make a decision on potentially what to start with. But I will always say, Google, is definitely the, safe bet essentially, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's I have an interesting take on Google, but I want to go through all the stats and then I'll let you know. Okay, so this is just basically one graph, so they're all like on the same, so you don't have to remember like what's the scale for each of them. So you should see like, these periods, it's not always the same. Like sometimes you have periods where Google is actually doing better in terms of reply rate than actually Outlook, and vice versa. But definitely, like I said, this is kind of like a bit puzzling, this sort of like trend of Gmail going down. Anyway, the other thing that actually has a huge impact is not just the sender, but also the recipient. So if my sender is Google and I'm sending to Microsoft, it's not the same as if I'm sending to Google. It's not the same to I'm sending to someone else. So I have some stats here, and those ones, unfortunately, are only the last 3 months. But again, you can see like they're evolving. And then you have, so here is basically if you're using Gmail and the recipient is also having Gmail. So it's Gmail to Gmail. And you could see that you get like 0.85%. You have a big drop in February here. Not sure why. And but basically that's about this. And then you could see that receiving on Outlook is actually pretty worse. So whether you're sending with Gmail on Outlook, receiving on Outlook is pretty tough getting a reply from an Outlook recipient. Where if you're sending it from Outlook and you have a Gmail recipient, you're gonna get better results than if you're sending from the own structure of Gmail. It's pretty funny, right? You wouldn't necessarily expect that. You would think like, oh, Gmail to Gmail is so much easier. Yeah, but at the same time, I think Gmail is protecting their own users and they have all the information possible when you're using their same platform. When you're coming from another platform, they don't quite know and they give you the benefit of the doubts. But yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of folks say, you should be always doing ESP matching, and
yeah, no, that's not
matching ESPs, Google to Google and Outlook to Outlook. But even though without looking at data, I was like, why would you think it would work? Because if I would, I used to work at Google. So if I would work at Google and I have access to all the mailboxes and all the data,
yeah, right. That's right.
I actually penalize the behavior, right? Because I have access to all the data.
100%.
Penalized because I have no access to Microsoft's data. So I can't do better decisions here because I don't have access to data. But in Google, to me, ESP matching was always this thing that somebody invented the whole thing and said it's better. And then nobody was able to prove that and properly.
Well, I got the stats. I can look at it, right? I actually build the stats so I can verify this hypothesis. And yeah, I think it's funny. There's only Outlook who doesn't really care. They just send. It's like, we give a lot of credit to Google because they are like supposedly very high tech, right? So we expect more from them, basically. Anyway, I did one for you as well, which is SMTP. So SMTP to Gmail and SMTP to Outlook. So again, like super volatile, right? And again, it depends. Obviously, it depends. Like some people will bring like 200 inboxes from, one provider, and suddenly it's sort of like impacted because their volume was so high. So it's always a bit more difficult with SMTP to figure it out. So anyway.
But it's something, just question too, because I haven't played around with QuickMail. But I guess in QuickMail or a bunch of other softwares, you can see what by ESP. Right? So,
yeah, it's just basically a tick. You tick and you say, okay, well, I want to see. You get all your stats, whether it's bounce or unsubscribe, click, open, reply, positive reply, negative reply, and you can split this by sender and provider. It's really like a couple of clicks. Like you see here, those 3 dots, you basically click on it and then you choose your stuff, and there is a lot of menu to actually play with, and you can add all your styles. I think QuickMail, basically there are like three massive big points of why I would want to use QuickMail. First is for superior deliverability, because we set up everything properly, and then again, like I mentioned, the two innovation of this year, and we got a third one actually coming up soon, which is pretty fun. But there is that. There is the stats is the second point, because our stats is really actually quite unique in the sense that we've got the best stats in the market, like hands down, because of the way we're collecting stats. Instead of creating the stats when we're receiving things, we attribute the stats to when you send things. So you could say like, oh, when I'm sending on Friday, this is when I'm getting the reply. If you get all the reply on Monday, you can't say like, oh, Monday is a great day for sending emails. No, it's a great day for receiving the emails that you send on Friday. You know what I mean? So anyway, we have the best stats in the world. And the third one, which may not be interesting to you, is basically managing multiple accounts. Like we got the best, interface when it comes to managing multiple workspaces, and all the stats get aggregated as well. Anyway, moving on. Okay, what are the stats I have? So this is provider distribution. This one is always very interesting to me, because a lot of people, if you listen to people, you're thinking like, oh my God, Gmail's got 90% of the market. And it's not really true. So these are the actual distribution of inboxes in QuickMail. So you can see that 66%, so like 2/3, let's just say like 2/3 of the inboxes in QuickMail are Gmail inboxes. Then you have 20% of Outlook inboxes, so Microsoft, and then you have like 12% of custom SMTP. That's all fine. So that's the basic, the distribution. But if you look at the people that get contacted, which is the next one, you'll find that pretty much all the time, and it's also valid for all the leads that's been imported to QuickMail, it's pretty much always like a third of each. Like you got a third of Gmail, a third of Outlook, and a third of anything else. Weird thing is like you got quite a lot of Yahoo as well. I think it's for brick and mortar, type of businesses like chiropractor, or hairdresser, whatever, like restaurants, whoever you want to contact. But that's basically always the sort of like distribution. Did you find some similar stuff for you, Frank?
No, I totally agree with you. There's a lot of folks that are sending to, using essentially maps data where they, for example, they would scrape the email addresses, right? And it could be just a bunch of, as you said, Yahoos and et cetera, right? So a bunch of other stuff. And that's something you kind of want to take into account, what else, is in there, right? So whether you're thinking about ESP matching or not, I always say you should know the ESP of your typical customer. So my typical customer,
100%.
is Google Workspace account, right? So this is how I'm thinking back in my head, how can I improve deliverability when it comes to landing in Google versus Outlook? I don't care too much about Outlook because a lot of, I'm not in an enterprise game. I don't send emails to a lot of enterprise companies that are predominantly using Microsoft 365. So I'm less concerned about landing there, but I'm definitely more concerned about making sure I always land in Google Workspace account.
Makes sense. All right. So okay, so open tracking. This was an interesting subject because for a while we were the first one to say like, actually, don't use email, don't use open tracking. It's it could impact your deliverability. The only fact that you know about your deliverability is going to impact it. And then recently, I mean, a couple of years ago, we say like, actually, no, use it, but use it on the second touch, right? So you send the first email, and then instead of like being this black box, no idea what, on the follow-up, you enable it because you can in QuickMail, you can do it on per touch. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But now I put up some data and I'm like, since January this year, I mean, like now I'm like, maybe turn it off. And I'm going to show you what. Yeah, that's a fun, that's a fun slide that Frank added. Yeah.
That's what happens when you enable open tracking, and you'll see that not nasty banner essentially that Google introduced last year. And yeah, I think it just gave another opportunity for the folks that are receiving emails to essentially spam those emails, right? So and we're in the business where we want to figure out ways of how to reduce the number of times that your prospects are reporting as spam. And yeah, this is definitely very, very nasty. Essentially, folks will be clicking on the report spam button. Nobody knows how much is that, but the fact that you're, in the face saying show image. So why would, and then you click on that, show image, and nothing is being shown because it's invisible image, right? So it's a funny thing about
Sometimes.
this show images. So like you literally see nothing typically in that email. So you're disappointed. You may report it as but yeah, definitely a lot of people are like, okay, I can click on the report spam button. And yes, they're essentially, what I'm trying to say is without even seeing the data, I'm definitely sure there will be essentially more spam reports by just having that button. So more users were essentially clicking on the report spam button, and essentially that also negatively then impacts performance. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. Do you know the actual impact?
No, we haven't run sort of a test on this yet. But I mean, generally speaking, we're just saying, no to open rate tracking. And we have quite a good article in the Help Center that just kind of gives you 20 reasons why you should not track open rates. I mean, the main one is like it's just that it's flawed, right? Because if nobody knows in the audience, essentially, if you're landing in Microsoft versus Google, the metrics will be very different. You essentially typically have much higher open rates by landing into Google Workspace accounts, and then much lower open rates by landing into Microsoft. And that's just how things are. I'm not going to go into depth why that's the case. But if you looked at the previous kind of data by Jeremy, where it shows, hey, a third of the folks, have Google accounts, a third of the folks have Microsoft accounts, right, across aggregate data. But then in your particular case, what if all the emails that you're delivering are Microsoft 365 accounts? So then your open rates will be much, much lower than delivering to Google Workspace accounts. And that's just a big thing. And I think that it's about 20% difference in open rate roughly. So as an example, I typically see Microsoft healthy open rates being about, say, 40%, and that's like good. And that's because of the way that Microsoft kind of is tracking stuff. And then on the Google side, it's like 60%. And it's not because something technically intrinsic, it's just because the way that things are being tracked, that pixel that you insert into the email, how it's being triggered, etc. So you can literally have a 20%, percentage points difference purely how the pixel is being triggered on their end. So yeah, it's something for you to kind of to think about it. And apart from this reason, there's like other 20 reasons on why you should forget about it, because essentially all the companies like Apple and a bunch of other ones, they're all trying to block those pixels, right? So even though your emails have been seen, like in this example, right, that we are seeing on the right-hand side, even though the person has seen this email, the pixel hasn't been fired. So it's just things like that. So that's why I always say look at reply rates, look at opt-out rates, etc. So Jeremy's going to go into that, but essentially look at everything else apart from open rates, and that's really the North Star sort of that you should be looking at. But I love how people still like open rates. We should be looking at open rates, and if your customers are telling you, I want to see the open rates. Even my customers are telling me, can we look at the open rates? Can we enable open rates? It's like, no, don't do that. It's really bad, And I always say, if like your reply rates like go off the cliff, and it will happen, right? So you spin up infrastructure, you go reach out to folks, and yes, if you're seeing like reply rates declining or just going off the cliff, then something is wrong. Like you don't need open rates for that, right? So you could definitely start troubleshooting, trying to figure out where the issue lies.
I mean, it takes probably like an average of like 2 days to get a reply. So where the open rate is kind of immediate, we have something in QuickMail that actually enable you to wait a certain time before actually triggering an open rate to avoid like spam filters and stuff like that. Like you could put like 10 minutes, 20 minutes after sending the email that you're only going to start taking the open rate. Some people use it like for a very long time, like a week. And then basically when they receive like a ting, I mean, like someone reopening their email, stuff like that. That's funny. But yeah, I agree. It's most of the time, it's not a reliable metric, and it will hurt you. So you have to know what you're doing with it, I think. And we can actually figure out like the actual impact on the open rate. Oh yeah, so this is a few things that you can do on QuickMail. You can actually disable it for Gmail specifically. So we should actually just look and say, Actually, because I don't want this banner, I'm gonna just disable it for Gmail because Outlook doesn't care. And for the other one, maybe I care, maybe I don't care. So again, you can do it. But one cool thing that we've done is like image tracking. So you're mentioning like, show image, you click on it and then you see nothing. So what we actually did is like, if you actually add an image in it, then we're actually just going to attach the pixel tracking to the image. So instead of having like two images to open, they will only open one, and then you also have the ability to add, if you just want to see the image with no tracking, you could also add specifically just the embedded of the image. So people will see it whether they have image turned off or on, because it will be part of the email. So we do a lot of things. And like I mentioned, like you could enable it just on follow-ups. And I think that could be a nice, kind of like debugging tool. Like if you're really not getting anything and you don't really know where it's going, then you could potentially enable it, even for, just a day or something like that, right? Anyway, moving on. So this is the actual results with on or off of the pixel tracking. And I find that like fascinating. This is the first time I'm actually seeing those. So I haven't looked at it since the beginning of the year, like we're like 3 months in. And it's obvious that something's been going on in the world. Right now, you can see in red is the reply rate for people who have open tracking turned off. And in blue is for people who have open tracking turned on. So even though there is no real impact on the one that kept it on, the one that turns it off are actually experiencing a huge boost. Isn't that cool?
I mean, it's to me, it's obvious, right? But it's good to see that on the macro level, in terms of the data, right? And you can see it's literally more than double, in terms of number of replies by just switching it off. And so this is why
I wouldn't have expected that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, it's obvious, right? Because on the receiver end, everybody's becoming smarter and smarter, right? So whether that's Google, right, the ESPs, or whether that's the anti-spam softwares, right? So I know that everybody wants to track everything, but at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do in the world of sales, it doesn't matter whether you're VP sales or you're just an SDR, whatever, is to drive pipeline, right? So, but you need to figure out, you need to maximize that outcome. And yes, along the ways, you're like, I want to track open rates so I can track these, whether my campaigns are performing or not. But actually, you are damaging. So I always say, by default, I recommend to switch it off. So for example, in our software, we have these sort of default settings. And by default, we switch off the open rate tracking. We just recommend to keep it switched off. We just explain why that's the case. And I think, generally speaking, people are just more successful that don't track open rates. And I think the major senders out there, there's some major senders out there, none of them actually tracking open rates, unless you're something like an agency and then your client essentially forces you. But essentially, I can tell you, I'm connected to like thousands of individuals in this space, and nobody will tell you to track open rates unless the end user forces you, essentially, right? And they understand that it has a negative impact on deliverability. Only in those cases, open rates are being tracked. So yeah, it's hence my recommendation. Look at the other stuff that makes a huge difference.
I agree. I would have expected for that the red line stays the same and the blue line actually drop. Not that the red line is going, much better.
Well, yeah, especially with the banner, etc. Yes, but I would say, maybe just a matter of time. But I expect the delta to be essentially over time as we progress. I think as an ecosystem, is that the delta will get bigger and bigger, essentially. So yes, the blue line maybe will be slowly but surely going down. And you can see that, I think, if you do some additional analysis, you see there is a slight drop there in the blue line. Look at historically, and it slowly but surely kind of sort of goes down. I can see that at least. I don't need the line there, but definitely there's a huge difference in the red line. But what I would expect, give it another sort of 6 to 12 months, you will see a bigger delta between the red line and the blue line, because the blue line
we'll do another webinar in 6 months then.
Yeah. This exact metric again.
So when I saw this, my quick thinking was like, okay, how is that looking like per providers? Because yeah, sure, we know Gmail is displaying this banner, but not Outlook. So let's have a look. So Gmail, it's obvious, like it's very clear, it's here. Like you see this massive bump. But for Outlook, it's not as clear. So what I find interesting is like kind of like all sort of like went a little bit down, but I don't know, like it's almost like the jury is still out, but it's clear that if it carries on like this, then it's clear that effectively there will be this gap appearing. I mean, Outlook is always lagging on everything Gmail is doing, so I'm not surprised there.
Mhm.
And then we see the sort of like same trend for SMTP as well. So
Mhm.
yes, now I'm gonna have to recommend people to turn it off, or like I say, use it on the second or third touch, or definitely disable it for Gmail, or link it to an email, meaning is you really have to have an email,
By the way, we
an
have
image. Sorry.
a
Mhm.
question in the audience if you want to take that. Can you see it?
What's that? Can you isolate reply rate by open tracking on the second email and beyond? I can't, unfortunately. I don't have that in the data. I don't have the touch position on the
Mhm.
data, which is annoying because I do want to figure out like, people replying on the second touch or the third touch. So I don't have that yet. I need to put it, and then we'll need to look at it again, in a year.
Cool.
Oh yeah, that's on you.
Yes. So we're going to transition to part two. And we looked at a lot of data that comes from typically the software that executes the emails, right? So fantastic data there, Jeremy. Thank you. And naturally, I always say, generally speaking, in terms of when it comes to success in cold emails, there's these four main pillars. So one is the execution pillar, so executing emails in the right way, looking at the stats, etc. Then there's the infrastructure that we're going to dive into. Then pillar three is, in my eyes, is the copy pillar, making sure you have the right copy, and copy plays a huge part when it comes to deliverability. And then the final one is the lead. So we're not touching leads, we're not touching really the copy much. We're gonna dive deeper right now into the infrastructure pillar. So once you got your infrastructure, it doesn't matter what infrastructure you decide to go with, but we're going to talk about it in a bit. One thing that you definitely want to be doing is consistently, whether that's on a weekly or on a monthly basis, is you want to be running essentially what's called placement tests. Placement test essentially is you send an email to a bunch of Google accounts, a bunch of Outlook accounts, which is what matters the most typically in the world of B2B, and you want to see whether your emails are landing in the primary or not. Now, one recommendation is to do this across more than one provider and across multiple seed lists. And the reason for that is that every Google Workspace account is not essentially built the same way. It probably is the best way to describe this. Essentially, because every provider will have a pool of or a seed list of particular Google Workspace accounts and particular Microsoft 365 accounts, but it doesn't mean that across the other provider, the same Google Workspace accounts, Microsoft 365 accounts are exactly the same. So I got a bunch of questions on LinkedIn last week around, hey, why is the data? Are they lying? No, the providers are not lying. I would not expect, QuickMail or anybody else to lie. It's just that what the results are, you're showing that to the user, you're showing the real data. And then the question becomes, why is it different? Well, different because those mailboxes are intrinsically different. They come from different pools, different geos, maybe, et cetera, et cetera. So this is why I always recommend like at least two placement test providers. So we have one called WarmForge. There's MailReach, for example. There's a bunch of other ones. You're going to just Google it, spam tests or placement test. And then the other thing is using the mail tester, just checking whether everything's fine from the kind of header perspective. And this is something that you should do. This is what I call maintenance on the infrastructure. You should do that literally on a either weekly basis or monthly basis. It really depends on how much infrastructure you have, but you definitely want to be doing this once you start seeing problems, right? So your reply rates are either tanking or essentially you're not seeing any results. So this is the first thing that you want to do, run through this. So what types of infrastructure there are? So we already covered that. Thanks to Jeremy. So there's the world of Outlook or MS365. There's the Google world of Google. By the way, across these two ESPs, you can buy naturally directly, right? So it's quite a painful process, or you can outsource the process of creation of these mailboxes. Or the other thing is you can buy from a bunch of resellers or natively built in within the sending softwares. And then the other approach is using the SMTP part, right? So you typically have two types of SMTP providers. So like a shared IP pool, which is a cost-effective way of setting up infrastructure in 5 minutes. And essentially, you're sharing an IP with other businesses, normal businesses, essentially on the same IP. And then there's the other approach, is what's called a dedicated IPs, right? So the IP only belongs to you, and you're banking on your own reputation. A lot of people asking me, what's better, Frank? Is it the shared IP pool or the dedicated IPs? And I was like, it depends. Depends on the ICP. So so if you're like what I call a good sender, so you're following religiously all the best practices in the world of email deliverability, then you should be banking on your own IP. But then if you're kind of new to the game, I would typically stick to like shared IP pools on everything that I do. You're kind of diluting it actually across everybody. That's probably the best way to describe this. Naturally, cost plays another factor, but I think what really matters in today's world is really making sure your deliverability lasts as long as it can be. So yeah, let's dive deeper. So what is the ultimate setup? I couldn't actually put a really good chart for this, but together. But essentially, what we are seeing is that you can improve essentially performance significantly if you use more than one ESP. And especially when you also look at the sophisticated companies that are in this space for a very long time and would use a bunch of different solutions, you would typically see that they would use 2 to 4 ESPs. So just like you're diluting across multiple domains and mailboxes, as a concept, right? So that Jeremy introduced back in the days. My take is that you should also spin up, 2 to 4 ESPs and dilute the sending across up to 4 ESPs, right? I would not go beyond 4, but I would not also do below 2. So personally, I run on 4 ESPs. So definitely, I use Google, I use Microsoft, I use MailForge, and I use InForge. I have a 4 ESP stack, and I just dilute, and I just send quite a low volume. And low, it really depends on everybody's eyes, but some folks send like 5-10 emails on per mailbox per day. Some other folks send 30 cold emails per mailbox per day. It depends on kind of few factors, but really the max that you should be pushing ever a single mailbox is like as 30 cold emails on per mailbox per day. So let's go further. So if you do decide to go with any sort of dedicated IP infrastructure provider out there, it's very important that you don't use providers that sometimes would recycle IPs, and essentially they would use burned IPs that they would provision. You really want to get what's called a brand new IPs that you would set up for your infrastructure. So what you see in here is just a random deliverability test that I just literally ran today. So it's the same 40 mailboxes. But what I've done here is I just literally have changed the IP address on those domains and mailboxes, and essentially from burn IP to IP that was sort of replaced with a brand new fresh IP, everything starts to land in the primary by purely replacing IP. So this is how big of a thing an IP is. And this is only applies typically to dedicated providers, but also I've seen a bunch of times also when I was spinning up essentially my accounts on Google Workspace, I got a burn IP as well. So, but the Google does actually a good job around replacing its IPs, right? So it has a sophisticated systems, right? So this is why deliverability will pick up. But what I'm trying to say is like you can check your IP whether it's burned or not. And definitely you should think about also about replacing the IP, and it plays a bigger part on the SMTP providers. Now let's talk about domains, right? So a lot of folks know that you need to buy a bunch of domains, and it really depends on how big your TAM is, how many emails you want to send per sequence or campaign, so things like that. But I always say buy the .com domains, and then there's always typically what's called the second best ones to buy if you can't really find the domains. But let's say now to MailForge or InForge or whatever, you can literally just type in your primary domain, and you can get 50, 100 domains or whatever, how many you need, and then that's typically for .com domains that we always recommend. So we don't recommend setting up anything else really, and there's no technical differences. What the difference is when you look from a kind of user perspective. So because naturally internet exists for a very long time, right? And most of the companies, when they created their domains, they are .com domains. So users are less likely to report essentially .com domains for spam than other domains, right? Because essentially, if the user starts to look at the domain and then looks at like, oh, it's .co, .net, or whatever, it becomes suspicious because there's actually not that many companies out there in the world that actually use .co or .net, etc. All the big companies, they all are sitting on .com domains. Until today, when we have a lot of .ai domains, right? So a lot of AI companies are popping up. So these are also legit companies, and you don't typically would spam also a lot of .ai domains. But we'll have a look at that in a bit. So yeah, so my typical recommendation and what everybody should follow is simply to buy .com domains, purely because users are just less likely to report those for spam. So this is what the data says, essentially. The data says that what do people actually buy? So naturally, we have millions of domains, and majority of them, which is like 93%, not sure whether you can see, guys, 93% of all domains that folks purchase from us are .com domains. It just literally dominates. But that's because naturally we stipulate that when trying to prove, deliverability, etc., and trying to figure out ways, like if we tell the user, hey, please just buy .com domains because you're going to get the fewer spam reports and you're going to be more successful, like the data proves that, right? So that we definitely push people to do this quite aggressively, because anything else could typically mean worse of deliverability. But let's have a look maybe on per domain level in a bit when it comes to performance. Now, what comes after the .com, right? What are the top level domains that are being bought? So we can see here naturally .net is the second popular one. .co, .org, .co.uk. So naturally, there's a lot of also senders in the UK as well, and they're targeting the UK market. And I always say, if you're going after the French market or the German market, etc., you definitely should be using also the localized domains. So let's say if we work with a big company in Europe, or let's say, and if they have like 3 markets, UK, France, and Germany, naturally for the Brits, you give them .co.uk domains, they should set it up. Then for the French folks, .fr, and for the Germans, .de, right? So this is, from my perspective, this is actually much better than .com domains if you're able to localize that way. But people are just sometimes lazy to do that, and just do the blanket approach of .com domains. So, but let's have a look at then performance, right? So then of these domains, which we're gonna do in a bit. Now, so I mentioned, I think early on, how many mailboxes you should be setting up. I always say 2 to 3 mailboxes is typically the recommended. So what do the professionals or the pros typically set up? They actually set up 2 mailboxes per domain. So all the big senders in the market, they typically do 1 domain, 2 mailboxes. And then how many emails per mailbox they send, it literally varies, like I mentioned, from anywhere from 10 to 30 emails, somewhere in that range. Some even do 5 emails per mailbox, like crazy. But essentially, it is getting tougher, right? So Google, Microsoft are doing more policing, which is why you're then distributing the load and even reducing the number of emails that you're sending per mailbox. But it really depends. I would say where your ticket size, meaning the deal size, is like, let's say 6 figures. So all my customers, I think, where I ask them, hey, what's your typical deal size? And if they're going to say 6 figures, then I say you should do 1-to-1 ratio. That means 1 domain, 1 mailbox, right? Because it's going to cost you a lot not to land in primary. You're better off buying a bunch more domains, bunch more mailboxes. So essentially reducing even further the probability of landing in spam. But that's very rare, right? That's very rare.
We find there's a couple of interesting things. Like we find that reputation is really linked to the domain. So when one email is burned, all the other emails on that domain are burned. So what's the point in having like 5? Like that makes no sense to me.
Yeah. So yes, naturally, yeah, it is on a domain level.
Most of the blacklist anyway work like that as well. So if you're blacklisted, then the domain is gone.
Yeah, so that's on a that's definitely things that impact on the domain level. But we've seen, for example, where one mailbox lands in spam and the other one doesn't from the same domain, even though yes, the deliverability or IP and everything, or like blacklisting and then reporting the domains definitely lies on a domain level. But you still see the differences there, where for some reason one mailbox does land in primary and the other one doesn't. But yes, I will totally agree with you that
sometimes there is time, like if you send like too many on that domain or from that domain, some will pass, the other one won't. So it depends also on on the infrastructure you're sending to. But on average, I agree with you. Like 2 I mean, I never use more than 3. It's
Yeah, well, in our space, we set a hard cap of 5. There is a workaround, but we literally don't let the user do more than 5.
we
And,
set it to 3 on QuickMail, so you can go ahead and buy your Google inboxes, but we set it to 3 max. Yeah.
well, there are some other use cases that people sometimes have, and like, Frank, but I really want my mailbox. Is like, all right, do 5, but not more than that.
Yeah, so where it makes sense is usually when you have multiple sales reps and you want like 1 per sales rep, then yeah, okay, I understand. But most of the time, people are thinking for volume. Oh, I'm gonna diversify. I don't really feel like buying another domain. I'm gonna buy another inbox. Like, dude, you're actually doing the wrong calculation here. But yeah, I get you. Yeah, I think it's
All
smart.
right, let's look at by performance then by TLD. So I pulled the data from our system last 30 days, put it into Excel, and you can see it for
Nice.
yourself. And even though I said, hey, listen, just use .com domains. You can see that the .com domains are actually not number 1 when it comes to the reply rate, right? So, but naturally, but you also see that majority of the domains that were bought, right, from our systems are .com domains. And so naturally, there's a lot more data than the other ones, right? So naturally, when we're looking right now .it or .eu, .online, we're seeing much higher reply rates, but also the size is significantly lower. But definitely, one of the
I love the .de, like the German people. They're gonna unsubscribe as soon as they receive an email. They're just awesome. The German guys
you
are
would
like hard
assume
to
that the
crack.
German domains are bought for the German audience, so the unsubscribe rate, yes, is the highest.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody
The .cash
doesn't
is a
know
funny one.
if somebody doesn't know anything about Germans don't like cold emails, and they will want to report you to all authorities and etc.
Of course, they would ask you where you get my data and stuff, and they give you hell.
But I agree. Also, the cash one is an interesting one. Why would cash, a much higher unsubscribe, rate? Maybe that's just an outlier. For me, definitely the .de is something that I experienced myself, just personally. Sending emails to the Germans, even in German, they're still gonna tell you, how dare you sending me an email. So that's on that. But yeah, if you look at the French, it's 0. So I mean, maybe by the way,
you don't have enough data.
not enough data. Naturally, the unsubscribe rate really depends if you're actually activating unsubscribe rates.
Right.
Unsubscribe links.
Better not do it with French. That's true. Don't leave them a chance to unsubscribe.
Yes. So yeah, but naturally in Germany, you because you have to really follow GDPR.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
Right. So then you can see what the unsubscribe rates are. But yeah, there's definitely the whole debate around, should you include unsubscribe links or not? So it looks like for all .fr domains that have been purchased and sent, we don't see unsubscribe rates being used. 0 just means that they're not actually being used. Or not enough data, which is why it goes down to 0. Cool. The other thing that definitely is worthwhile to touch upon, because it's definitely a topic in the market, is warm-up pools. And if you go to Reddit, a lot of people talk on Reddit about warm-up pools. This provider has a good warm-up pool, that provider doesn't have a good warm-up pool, and it really depends. But naturally, everybody's trying to build a really good warm-up pool and does a lot of things behind the scenes to improve the warm-up pool and how things work and how diversified it is and blah, 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 right? So there's a lot of work that goes into that, and running warm-up pools is also not cheap because you have to be sending emails nonstop, and there's gazillion of emails that have to go back and forth. So, but it's an important process, and I think there's also a lot of people discussing whether warm-up pool actually works or not. I can tell you, warm-up pool does work. And Google really does not like warm-up pools, and the reason why is because we talked to Google, and Google does not like warm-up pools, and they're gonna tell you or gonna send you like emails, whatever, automation emails saying you've been naughty, you've been using warm-up pools, etc. So they definitely don't like warm-up pools. So if Google doesn't like warm-up pools, or doesn't matter, other folks don't like warm-up pools, that means they do work, and yes, they do improve reputation, and they do work. It's just that you need to be using good warm-up pools. So because if you're not going to use good warm-up pools, we've seen that infrastructure burns within the warm-up period, even before you start sending cold emails. and you're like, what has happened? And one of the things that can happen is you've been using a warm-up pool where it's not necessarily the best pool, maybe. And so definitely do be cautious of that. And it's hard to say what is a good warm-up pool or not, but I would say there's a lot of sort of, let's call it, trending data on Reddit and a bunch of other places. You can ask people where do they see problems with warming, etc. Everybody has their own perception whether a warm-up pool with the same provider works or not. So there'll be a lot of people just gotta say, wow, it works really great. Others will say it doesn't work a lot.
Yeah,
Right?
of
So
course.
I don't think I have a good
Well,
answer on this topic unless you have it, Jeremy.
no,
Um,
I think you nailed it. The thing I will add is that the big lie of warmer pool is like they don't tell you their composition. So,
yes,
if all you're doing, like you were mentioning, if all you're doing is contacting people on Gmail, make sure your warmer pool has Gmail email in it.
yes,
Yeah, because a lot of time, like I remember, I think there was like a story with one of my competitor where basically they loaded like all their inbox on the warmer pool were like in fresh like custom SMTP inboxes.
mhm,
And then after that they tried to contact like Gmail. And it's like, dude, Gmail never seen your email ever. Like, sure, you've been warming it up
yes,
actually with other
yes.
servers. So make sure the composition is quite good. I think that's an important thing, I
Yeah, I
would say.
mean, I typically say there's no point warming up with SMTPs. There's only a point warming up with Google and actually Microsoft
Correct.
accounts, right? So yes, you do need to have well, a bunch of those, not all of those in the pool. And yeah, so this is something that a warm-up provider should do, where they shouldn't be warming up with SMTPs because there's no point. It doesn't improve your deliverability, right? Because if you've just been warming up with SMTPs, that means Google has never seen your emails, right? So
Yep,
that's the
exactly.
we manage behind the scenes, and that's something that all the sophisticated folks are doing this. But definitely, what I'm trying to say is like there's also these sometimes new warm-up pools that pop out of nowhere, which is fine, right? So I always welcome new competition, but you have to
Vibe coding.
good warm-up pool is not that easy. And you just got something you should be questioning. Go to chat support, ask them, ask the questions, do your due diligence, etc. So then the other thing that I want to mention is it's important that you warm up what's called good domains from non-sensitive categories. So I've seen, I've been playing around with our own warm-up pool, and with other warm-up pools and so on and so forth. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, are there any issues with essentially the companies that you're warming up? And there can be a bunch of issues if you're warming up what's called sensitive senders. I'm not going to mention what sensitive senders are. You can just read about it online. So I used to work at Google. There was these non-sensitive advertisers and sensitive advertisers. There's a bunch of sensitive advertisers. You definitely want to be not warming up too much with these sensitive advertisers, because
That's
sensitive
funny.
advertisers can be flagged, and they can negatively impact your domain reputation if you're warming up with them. So
Mm.
you definitely need also a system in place. So, for example, what we do, we reactively ban, unfortunately, accounts to ensure that the health of the infrastructure stays good. So we ban a lot of sensitive categories. What could that be, for example? So I got to mention one is gambling. So essentially, a lot of people send cold emails for gambling purposes. We don't accommodate that because it can harm essentially the ability for the other guys in the warm-up pool, but also it can impact negatively the whole infrastructure. So we just ban by default, and then we also practically ban when we see very weird behavior. So that's something that we're doing just to make sure we don't have these weird actors. Whereas in other warm-up pools, they will let in anybody, right? And that's not really great. Like warming up with this, kind of engagement pod kind of logic works only if you're warming up with other good guys. A good guy, you're going to be warming with other good guys, right? So that's how it works. And then the other thing naturally that has to happen in the warm-up pool, and it can happen, you're seeing bounce rates, but these bounce rates have to be as close to 0% as possible. Sometimes you go into a warm-up pool and a lot of stuff is bouncing. Something's not right there. So this is just kind of just to think about on warm-up pools. Warm-up pools are important because they can negatively impact your infrastructure even before you send a single cold email. Now, you also need to figure out, one of the important things that Google, Microsoft likes is that engagement, kind of back and forth communication, right? Which is why warm-up exists, right? So warm-up increases, naturally inflates the reply rates, right? There's more and more engagement, there's back and forth, but it doesn't mean you can't have any engagement in cold emails. It's very important that you also figure out how to make people respond back to you, right? It's very important. So I'm gonna say some obvious things, but good targeting and clean list. Clean list, you run through email verification software, right? You're sending that. Good targeting means you don't just pull your data from a database like Apollo. You pull it like some really good lists that, I don't know, you scraped or you figured them out or etc. But essentially where there's a good affinity with pain that you're solving for your customers and that audience that you're reaching out, right? And sometimes, and it's not you're not pulling data essentially from a database. I always say the database stuff is the last resort when it comes to pulling the data. What could you use? So, for example, you could use, what could be good? I don't know. You could, for example, use lookalike data, right? So you have 100 closed won accounts, right, in your CRM, and you just find lookalikes against that, right? So you're reaching to the lookalike customers. That's a good test to do. But there's like 100 other things that you could do essentially. So definitely big thing on the list. So we're not going to go too deep, but it has a major impact on infrastructure. Then strong copy, including strong CTAs. It's sort of obvious, right? So if you're going to send an email that looks like it has been sent to a bunch of people and it looks like it's not relevant, then the likelihood of them reporting for spam is also very high. So first point, they're going to report you as spam because it's not relevant to them. It doesn't address the pain point that your prospect has. Second one, the copy is so bad. So even though I have the pain, the copy is so bad, I sometimes just report spam. I also report, by the way, folks, for spam. So it's not like I'm also one of these people. But don't be the person that subscribes to a newsletter and then you report the newsletter for spam. There's an unsubscribe button. There's some really naughty people that literally click on the unsubscribe button for the newsletters. Then the third one, so there's the third one is like use strong, good, or funny PSs as well. A PS essentially is a section at the bottom, right, where it gives you essentially not an ability to either say, hey, here's my checklist or whatever, something of value, but it could be just something funny, right, when it comes to unsubscribing. So this is an example that I've seen somebody use literally yesterday, where we didn't want to use unsubscribe links, right? So the opt-out links within the copy, or even with the headers, we just wanted to have a DPS, right? And it's just a funny thing that you can write. And you could even say something like, hey, if you want to ruin my day, please tell me to unsubscribe and tell me to fuck up, whatever, You can literally write that in an email. So because somebody will read that, somebody will, haha, this is different, right? This is a little bit of a pattern interrupt. And they will respond. And whatever they will respond, whether they'll tell you to fuck off or something, that response, you're getting these responses, is good for the engagement, is good for your infrastructure, right? So what I'm trying to say is simply with this is try and figure out how can you, even though people are not interested in your product, how can you make them respond back? Very important. Double up on your domains. So if your initial batch of domains burns, don't wait, quickly replace with another batch. So the most sophisticated folks in this space, always say time is money. What that means is when you realize that your infrastructure burns, and it will burn, and I typically see the infrastructure burning anywhere between 4 to 6 months period. Now, I don't have hard data on this. It's very hard to pull this. But if somebody asks me, Frank, how quickly do domains burn? 4 to 6 months is the burn rate, roughly. And so that just means that you have to replace the infrastructure twice a year. But anyway, so when you're getting to the point of like 4 to 6 months, at that point I will start, buying another batch of domains, and I'll put them to the warm-up pool. So when the D-Day happens, when it comes to it looks like it has burned, you don't wait, like you don't investigate. It's time is money. You definitely want to be replacing with the domains that have been already warmed up and they're ready to go, right? So, and you can build up a process for that or SOP to make that happen. But yeah, double up on domains. So all sophisticated players in the market, they always double up on domains. They always have this, what they call the batch of infrastructure kind of lying around, ready to go when the domains burn, and they will burn in a lot of cases. Not all cases, but they will burn in a lot of cases. Because naturally, when you buy these secondary domains, the reason why you're buying them is to burn them, typically, right? So you don't burn your primary, right? Typically, that's how, that's why you would use them. So why else will infrastructure burn? So if your pacing is off, sometimes what folks do is they send I've sometimes received 4 cold emails in a day in 24 hours. Guess what will happen when I see that many emails? I will report your spam. So pacing, make sure you pace it out. And I always say, send an email maybe every 3 days or whatever. The folks that I do, and I sometimes get emails from competitors, not you, Jeremy, but other ones. And
should receive from me. I'm gonna check. Why not?
And it's always funny in this space because we do receive emails from competitors, and it's called, oh, cool, copy. Yeah. But the pacing is very important. So how many days? What's the time interval? Between the first email and the second email. And I think if you want to reduce your spam rates, I would say send one email a week. If you want to really, really reduce spam rates, like one a week, and that's what I recommend. But personally, what we do is we have, I think, a 3-step sequence. So it's the first initial email goes out, a second email follow-up in 3 days, and then a third email which goes out in 7 days, 6-7 days or so. But one thing to know, the probability of spam report increased significantly after 2 emails in a sequence. So think of it this way. So how many emails does it take you when you're receiving a cold email to report that, sender as spam? How many emails is that? And that's about like 2 or 3, roughly. But all the pros in the space that I'm talking to, they always say we only send 2 emails in a sequence. Why do we send 2 emails in a sequence? Well, one of the things that you can't really control, and it doesn't matter what cold email, cold calling, etc., is how many people are actually in the market to buy your product. And I always say it's about 2 to 3% of the audience that's in market for potentially for your product, for the pain that you're solving, which is the reason why we need to scale. But when we scale, we have these spam issues that we need to address, right? So if you know that, and naturally there could be a user that's, that we send a couple emails, but they may be in the market next quarter. So what I typically recommend to do is like send 2 emails as a sequence. So think of it like a bit of advertising, like 2 impressions, let's say, and then follow up again after a quarter and send another 2 emails, right? To address the timing issue, right? Because there's not sometimes much you can do about the timing problem. So that means that over the course of a year, you'll reach out to the same prospect, same ICP, 3 to 4 times a year, unless they opt out or tell you to fuck off, right? So always keep sending, I always say, but be nice to people, good copy, good targeting, change the copy up every quarter, right? Whether that's politics, the new president has been elected in the US or whatever, anchor on something that's happening right now. So always change up the copy. Don't send the same stuff. So always make sure you're also not sending the wrong sending software. So I still have a bunch of customers that I'm transitioning from something like MailChimp, which is a newsletter software, to us, right? So that still happens, So please don't use the wrong sending softwares for cold emailing. So naturally, if you're gonna have a copy, if your copy is crap, you will receive low reply rates, and low reply rates also then just means it's burning your infrastructure a lot more when you have a crappy copy. If your targeting is off, so I already mentioned that, right? So, and the other thing that I would just say, try and get leads that nobody else has access to. Think of saturation essentially, right? So if you're pulling your data from these large databases like Apollo, ZoomInfo, etc., there's good likelihood, right, that there's other users that are pulling the same data, which is the reason why they make a ton of money, right? They have this data point, and then they resell that data point thousands of times. That same email. That means that same user is receiving a bunch of emails across different other companies, etc. And the best data in the market is the one that nobody has access to, right? Because that means that those folks are barely receiving cold emails, and that also means that that you're more likely to receive a reply because they're not getting that many replies. So what I'm trying to say here is like also try and figure out the data sources that are sort of not obvious, but you can still get a lot of ICPs to reach out to folks. So yeah. Then the final thing that I want to just finish off, and I know we're a bit over time, is so there's a lot of folks also in our space, in our customer base, that want to send emails to Fortune 500 companies, so these enterprise companies. But a lot of folks will also tell you, hey, it's pretty much impossible to be sending emails to those companies because naturally they're very strict about high email security protocols in place, right? So what does that typically mean? What you should do and what you shouldn't do? So definitely don't use what we call dedicated IPs. Dedicated IPs is not a great option to go and penetrate Fortune 500 companies, because when they use one of these softwares like Proofpoint, Mimecast, Barracuda, whatever, you name it, when they use these softwares, then they also have this network, just like the warm-up pool, where they're sharing that piece of data to another company, and essentially they block you across, whole Proofpoint's, system. So let's say you send an email to, here we have an example, Salesforce.com. You may not see it, guys, but let's say Salesforce.com is one of those softwares. So if let's say we're sending the same copy, let's say to Salesforce, and then some other company that also uses Proofpoint, then they're sharing the data behind the scenes, because the goal of Proofpoint is to stop these unsolicited emails, right? So, and one of the things that won't help you to deliver is when you're using dedicated IP. So this is when I'm saying, okay, Fortune 500 companies, definitely go with shared IP pools. And bottom line, actually, for Fortune 500 companies is use Google Workspace, MS365 to deliver into those. You've seen Jeremy's data, all right? So which one maybe you want to be skewing towards. But that's kind of, a little.
I'd say get both, honestly. Like, I mean, I agree with you. Like, last year, Microsoft has a big, fuck up in June. And basically everyone who was like sending emails with Microsoft were like bouncing back. And, you're going to have a provider that fucks up. So get both Google and Microsoft. And that way you're way more flexible if one is causing a problem.
Yeah. And that's all we have really for this session. We spent good well over an hour. I hope this was valuable to a lot of folks. Definitely eye-opening also, all the stuff that Jeremy has shared with me early on, and kind of just diving deep into a bunch of different really deliverability related topics. So maybe just to wrap it up, Jeremy, how can people find you?
quickmail.com/newsletter. Let's go for it. What about you, Frank?
I typically don't do newsletters. I know why. Like I always say, if you got a question, typically people will have a question. Just find me on LinkedIn, Frank Saunders, the guy with the bacon emoji, Mr. Bacon. People call it. Just send me a question. Typically, people have questions, so feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try and answer those, or ask Jeremy to answer some of the questions. Otherwise, yeah, newsletter, quick mail, and then on my end, typically if you have a just general question, just ping me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way.
Happy to be connecting on LinkedIn as well. Send an invite.
Yep, cool. Yeah, LinkedIn works the best. And then otherwise, guys, we'll be probably repeating this at some point in the future. If you have a special request on what you would like to see in the next edition, also please drop that or send us a ping. What you would like to see, what do you want us to dive into, and then we'll try and prepare that data for the next session. So yeah, cheerio.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Jeremy.